When hope is gone, undo this lock and send me forth on a moonlit walk. Release restraint level 0. Hey kids, wanna see a dead body?
Hi guys, this is the Void of the Ravenclaw. Welcome back to another fanfiction story. If you like this type of content, smash the like button and subscribe for future videos and updates that I do post on my community tab frequently. You can get access to any of my early content. Check out the Discord. This is the Second Chance of Life, Part 1, the Eclipse Flower. Several weeks has passed since Rose finally got access to several full-size samples of the glowing crystals that are currently in her lab after going through the safety checks before handling the crystals with her bare hands. Once she got the clear sign there is no danger, Rose began to pick up one of the crystals that is glowing quite brightly like a flashlight. Rose took out a small voice recorder out of her lab coat pocket and pressed record. Interesting. Apparently these glowing crystals in this large cavern produce some sort of light. Further checks in the crystal makeup need to determine if there's any connection between these glowing crystals and these strange looking flowers that they designate as Eclipse Flower. Rose immediately put one of the crystals in the scanning machines. When she put the crystal inside, she closed the door to the machine and started up. As the machine started to collect data, begin to appear on a large flat screen television in the laboratory. Rose stands in front of the television looking over the data. As she fixes her glasses with her finger, it's clearly evident these glowing crystals radiate some sort of power signature. Not enough to be dangerous, but enough to cast light. Note, these crystals are quite similar to the previous known objects that are grown inside caves, but not at this degree. Further study is needed. As Rose pressed stop on her small recorder device and put it back in her lab coat pocket, Rose checked the time on her watch. I suppose I deserve a break. See what type of food they have in the mess hall today. Rose stepped out of her laboratory, leaving Shadow at the lab, and made her way towards the large building on the other side of the greenhouse dome. When she stepped inside, she saw the place, which is jam-packed with soldiers from both countries and scientists. There you are, Rose. Why don't you come and join me? You're just in time. Rose sat down and greeted the other scientists that are sitting at the table with Vicky. It's good to see you step out of your lab. You haven't really left since you arrived. I like to keep myself busy. Whatever you're doing is working. You're clearly making progress. Right now I'm just studying these interesting glowing crystals. They're quite fascinating. Actually, but these crystals generate some sort of energy. My theory is these eclipse flowers is feeding off the light that these glowing crystals produce. But I'm still uncertain on the effects of the light on the plants itself. They've been exposed to these crystals for God knows how long. And it's just a theory after all. I have no concrete evidence of it yet. Please excuse me. As she got up, get a tray filled with food. Then she head back to the table and start to eat. Everyone could tell immediately when Rose started to eat. She clearly comes from a rich family, the way her etiquette is. So what have you found out? I take it you had some people study the Eclipse flower inside the dome. We have a scheduled team that constantly studies the plants from inside the greenhouse dome. Right now we're running a few experiments with one of the flowers. How it reacts to heat or extreme amounts of cold temperatures. Feel free to enter the dome at your leisure. I have no doubt you want to get a closer look at the Eclipse flowers for your research. I most certainly do. I appreciate it. I think another approach would do me some good. After eating, Rose went to the hot springs and went into the female side of the hot springs and put on some sort of swimwear and relaxed in the hot springs while Rose tied up her hair to avoid her hair from getting wet. Rose noticed there's not a whole lot of people inside the women's side of the hot springs. There's a couple Russian female soldiers and scientists there. Only 4 people max, not including her, in the hot springs. Right now, Rose chose to ignore them and focus on herself, making sure her body is completely relaxed. Rose only spent 40 minutes in the hot springs. When she was satisfied that she was completely relaxed, she got out and went towards the changing room to change into her normal clothes. When that was done, Rose proceeded to head back into her lab. Once Rose got into her lab, she immediately went back to work, examining the samples of the glowing crystals. They're different machines, trying to get as much data as possible. Eventually, Rose started to get tired, and she begins to shut everything down except for the scanning equipment. It's going to take several hours to get the results. After locking up, a shadow jumped onto her shoulder as she made it back to her quarters and immediately went to bed after she got her nightgown on and turned in for the night. The next morning, Rose was informed that Vicky wanted to see her. She met Vicky in one of the buildings that is used for meetings and to shoot off different ideas with each other from the different scientists. Good to hear. We're about to perform the first experiment on one of the Eclipse flowers. You're already doing the fire trials already? Indeed. Follow me. We have a separate building where we perform various experiments. They walked into a large building. Once they entered, Rose could see they're behind a glass, where there's a singular, smaller Eclipse flower in the middle of the room, filled with dirt. And different machines are scanning and collecting data. As Vicky pressed the intercom, "This is Vicky. Begin to experiment." As 2 soldiers entered the experiment room, holding flamethrowers, the moment the Eclipse flower sensed the danger, the flower immediately begins to shake. Rose watched closer as she stepped closer to the window. Fascinating. It didn't take long for the soldiers to unleash the flames, as flames shot out of the nozzle of the flame thrower. When the flames engulfed the flower. When the flames receded, the flower was completely unharmed. Suddenly, the Eclipse flower began to shake more violently, as the entire room was engulfed in a odorless and invisible smoke. Rose and Vicky's eyes widen as she watches the weapon that the soldiers were wielding begin to erode away. When their protective suits begin to do the same, eventually started to melt their faces of the soldiers. There was a loud scream until there was nothing left, as the body began to erode away. Rose noticed the protective glasses keeping them safe from the flower is slowly begin to erode away as well, along with the walls inside the room that the flower is in. Rose immediately grabbed Vicky's hand and pulled her out of the building. Before she left the building fully, she pressed the button. As they walked out, as the entire building went into a lockdown, Vicky was trying to keep her voice or her breathing under control. She would have never realized the danger she was in until it was too late, if it wasn't for Rose. Well, we definitely found out the Eclipse flowers are somewhat poisonous. Only problem we have is we have to identify the poison, or whatever that was. Thank Rose, you saved my life. Can't have my boss die on me. It would look bad. As Vicky laughed weakly, a tad bit, from Rose's remark. Can you handle everything? Here? I need some time to myself. Of course, take your time. I'll handle things while you're away. Thanks. You soldier. We might have a breach of an unknown poison. I want this entire building to be isolated off. Yes, ma'am. We'll do that right away. Good. I suggest you get started. We don't have a whole lot of time. We don't know how long the walls of this building will keep whatever's inside. Rose could already tell. Part of the building is beginning to erode away. The combination efforts of the Japanese soldiers and the Russian soldiers managed to isolate the entire building. As Rose watches, they lowered down some sort of metal box over the building using a crane. Was specifically made to withstand high coats of acid. After that was taken care of, Rose contacted the rest of the scientists and informed them that all trips to the greenhouse dome has been suspended until further notice. It's too dangerous. Given what happened in the fire experiment, they gladly agreed. Only reason Rose is not shooken by this incident, she's already been involved in dangerous experiments before, so this is nowhere near out of her comfort zone. The unknown has always been dangerous. Does Rose feel bad for the death of the two soldiers? Yes, but that won't stop her from deterring her to see this project through. They knew they were getting into. I clearly haven't been thorough enough when it comes to these Eclipse flowers. Halfway towards her lab, she took a small detour to check up on Vicky. Rose might not have been shaken up by it, but Vicky was. She knocked on Vicky's door, but no answer. So she stepped inside to see Vicky in the dark, trying to smoke a cigarette. But her hands were shaking too rapidly. Rose took the cigarette and put it out as she guided Vicky to her bed and laid her down and covered her up in her covers, blanket and quilt and all that. Before Vicky could speak, Rose placed her lip over her lip, or her finger over her lips. You've done enough today. You're gonna take the rest of the day off and relax. Vicky gave Rose a weak smile. She doesn't have any energy to fight, Rose. Look at you being all bossy. Rose rolled her eyes. At least your sense of humor is intact. Thank you, by the way. I feel bad for the soldiers that died. I do as well, but that can't be helped. They know what they were getting into. I know you're right, but it still gives a bad taste in my mouth, getting people killed. I'm trying to improve life, not destroy it. What about the greenhouse? No one's allowed inside. The entire greenhouse is under lockdown. What a relief. I don't want to be responsible for having more people killed. Enough about work. Get some rest. Can I ask you something? Go right ahead, Vicky. How fast you reacted to everything. Have you been in this sort of situation before? Yes, many times. Then I wish. I learned quite fast. The unknown is usually quite dangerous. Some of my work hasn't been the safest. But danger is required for progress. We'll have to install more safety measures. That's a given, but get some sleep. I'll be coming by from time to time to check up on you, seeing if you're doing all right. Thanks again, Rose. No problem. As Rose left Vicky quarters, Rose doesn't like to deal with people, but she knows how to comfort people. After all, she had lots of practice with all her younger siblings. She's the oldest of her family, so taking care of someone under extreme amount of stress is not foreign to her. Because Vicky was in no condition to do her duties, Rose temporarily took over the responsibilities to make sure everything is in working order. But first, she wants to do more thorough scans of the sample of the petal of the Eclipse flower. As she put one of the samples inside one of the other scanning machines and put on a more higher setting. The lesser the setting, the less time it takes for the scan to be complete. The higher the setting, the more longer the scan will take. When she started the machine, she left her lab to visit the other scientists, because it's going to be quite some time before she gets the results. Rose had run several projects as a lead before, so she has somewhat of an idea what Vicky's responsibilities are. Vicky might lead with more gentleness and kindness. Rose operates completely different. Serious, occasional compliments on their work when it's appropriate. Rose doesn't take the gentle approach like Vicky does, but Rose is not being outright cool to them either. Rose comes from a military family, so she likes to run her lab like a well-oiled machine. After several trips to several different laboratories that's being run by the other scientists, Rose went back to her lab to check on went back to the situation, to the building, to see how everything's going at the experiment building that was sealed off for safety, soldier status. Everything seems to be under control. Everything seems to be in the clear, Miss Blackheart. We sent several small robotic control robots for bomb disposal into the building, to whatever happened inside, and begin to run scans. The acid-resistant box we cased in the building managed to stop majority of it. We've already sent all the data collected through the small control robot to Vicky's lab. I want you to send me a copy. I'm currently in charge of the project until tomorrow. Understood, ma'am. We'll send a copy to your lab immediately. Good, now I must collect samples. How long will it take for you to open a path for me? It'll take us about 20 minutes, ma'am. Good, inform me once that is done. I'll be at my lab. Rose went back towards her lab. Rose immediately had Shadow turn on the power. As the lights flicker on as she went to her computer. As the soldier did what he was instructed and sent her the data, copy of the data, from the little looking robots that are usually used for bomb disposal. According to this, it definitely was corroded. But I didn't see anything in the testing room or the experiment building. Nor did the soldier mention any strange smell before their death. According to the file attached to the data from the corpse of the soldier, it's a new type of poison that they never came across. It's invisible. Some sort of corroded, invisible poison. I need to look more into this. With the sample still scanning, she left the lab and she went back to the experiment building to find it inside a plastic dome. The metal box is nowhere to be seen. Miss Blackheart, it's ready. We have protective seats to the side. Rose immediately put on the protected suit that had acid-resistant material as she entered the building where the experiment was earlier. She instantly started to look all around the entire room. The Eclipse flower is still in the middle of the room. As she begins to take samples, as she noticed where she was during the experiment, there was a large melted out hole for her to walk through. It seems that the small Eclipse flower still in the middle of the room is completely fine. No signs of burns on its petals or trunk. The Eclipse flower might be small, but it's still taller than a normal-sized human. Rose opened a small metal box as a pair of tweezers was revealed. As she took the tweezers out and began to take samples of the corroded poison and put in a specially made vial. As she continued to take samples for further study, she noticed the closer she got to the small Eclipse tree, it started to shake. Everyone inside started to withdraw. Rose was not panicking. Rose was mostly intrigued. She knows it's acting like it's threatened. A species of plant that has some sort of awareness is unheard of. After observing the Eclipse flower, from idle to shaking, and back to idle again, Rose chose to withdraw from the area. She walked out to the plastic dome and took out her voice recorder. While she was taking off the plastic suit, or the protective suit, and pressed play on her voice recorder. Mental note, these Eclipse flowers are displaying awareness. Possibly that invisible corroded smoke, or whatever it is, might be a defense mechanism. Further study needed. As she pressed the stop button on her little recorder. Thank you for your work, soldier. I've collected quite a bit of samples and data from this little experiment. I'll be returning back to my lab to investigate the corroded poison more closely. Rose decided to check up on Vicky before she went to her lab. She found her soundly asleep as she left without waking her up and head back to her lab. Rose spent the entire night at her lab, occasionally checking up on Vicky. The next morning, Vicky entered Rose's lab, bringing coffee. "Morning, Rose. I brought coffee. Thanks. I want to thank you again for taking care of things in my stead yesterday. It's no problem. I've had run my own projects in the past, so I had a base idea of what you needed to be done. Have you checked your computer yet?" "Yeah, I already checked over the data. Corroded invisible poison. Smoke by the data. But are you certain on your theory that you attached to the data?" "I'm almost 100% certain. These Eclipse flowers have some sort of awareness when they're in danger. We have to run more experiments to be certain, but I think the corroded invisible poison, smoke, might be a defense mechanism. Either that was always in their design, or somewhat over the long period of time these flowers existed, they've evolved in that way. When I went back inside the experiment building, the Eclipse flower was acting like it was scared. Each time, it was idle at first, but when I entered the room and got closer, it started to shake. I backed off and it remained idle. The closer I got, the more it shook. So I eventually had to back off." "Did you record it?" "That I did," as she handed over a small flash drive with the video on it. "Thanks, sadly, I have to catch up with work. I'll see you in a couple hours." As Vicky left, Rose drank her coffee as Rose began to watch her security footage outside of her lab. She sees soldiers patrolling the area constantly, but she noticed a group of soldiers hanging around outside of her lab more longer than they stood. Rose knew full well that's not the average patrol. Feeling uneasy, Rose even tightened security even further in her lab. As she tapped Shadow on the head, as Shadow back opened up to reveal a hidden compartment, revealing a handgun. She took the handgun and placed it back inside the cat. As the part of the cat that opened up begins to close back up, as Rose decided to keep Shadow on her at all times. Just a safety precaution. Rose only uses a gun as a last resort. Rose has not always worked with the best of people. And most people wouldn't even think about a scientist having a handgun inside a robotic cat. It took several weeks for Rose to get all the data from the scans, as a holographic image of Eclipse Flower's DNA appeared in a holographic image in the middle of the lab. It wasn't hard for Rose to make it. She used a good portion of the previous data from the other scientists in her data to digitally structure the genetic code of the Eclipse flower. After several weeks of studying, it was eventually identified the part of the flower that holds the poison is a poison sac, but the Eclipse flower can refill it on its own. But that's not really important, as Rose is looking at the DNA code of the healing properties of the flower. It's clearly isolated, so Rose is already thinking of methods for a new hybrid, bringing the isolated properties of the healing factor of the plant to the surface, and trying to see if she could completely eliminate the poison that these flowers produces. Rose immediately sent all of her discovery to Vicky through the computer. Rose left the lab to confirm a theory as she entered the greenhouse dome filled with Eclipse flowers. Without no protected gear, they're no longer a danger from exposure from the flowers. So Rose was correct in her theory. None of the plants seemed hostile. None of the Eclipse flowers were shaking like the one in an experiment building. Shadow is recording everything. As Rose began to walk through, going deeper, passing through several large Eclipse flowers, as she sees the observing tower in the middle of the dome. Rose noticed inside the dome there's a river that's most likely connected to the waterfall, just outside the dome. I sort of figured you would be the first one to enter without any protective gear when we got the all clear. The greenhouse dome is quite relaxing and dangerous. Yeah, if you threaten these marvelous creations. As Rose gently dragged her finger across the trunk of the Eclipse flower that she's standing in front of. As long as you're not hostile, these beautiful flowers are quite docile. A week turned into a month, as Rose spent as much time in her lab as she spent in the greenhouse, or the dome greenhouse, with the Eclipse flowers. Rose wasn't alone. Vicky studied the plants alongside with Rose. At this time, Rose and Vicky formed a friendship with each other. They still keep it quite professional, but they do see each other as friends. Rose is currently in the greenhouse alone, as multiple gunshots could be heard from outside the dome. Rose wasn't that far away from the exit of the dome. Rose immediately hid behind one of the large Eclipse flowers as several Russian soldiers came in carrying AK-47, wearing a different type of uniform that the Russian soldiers that are stationed here. Found out, according to our intel, there's a scientist that likes to spend time here. You know your orders. We need Blackheart alive. What about the rest of the scientists? Sir? They're expendable. When the first soldier passed the tree that Rose was hiding behind, Rose snuck behind the soldier and swept his feet underneath him. In mid-fall, Rose pulled out his battle knife, his combat knife, from his holster. When the man was finally on his back, Rose did not hesitate. She plunged the knife into his chest, piercing his heart. As Rose dragged the dead body into one of the smaller flowers of the Eclipse flower, as the flower petals begin to slow, closing up, concealing the body. And that's where we're going to stop it. I'll catch you guys in the next part.